Another transition that I can show you how to use is to make the element that is containing a number of divs, and we'll create one called a section div. And what we're going to do is on hover, when we roll over it, it's going to expand and reveal a number of different things underneath it. So let's try this by first going to the video.html page in the folder that we've been working with. And if you take a look at that one, in the aside we have a picture which has a class of aside pic, and there are a number of divs in there, each with quotations. Now these divs don't have the transition class on it, so when I roll over these they're not actually changing color. That's easy enough to apply, and you could choose to do that if you wish. What I want to do is to make only the picture be showing initially, and when we roll over it, it's going to expand. I'm actually going to leave one of these things out so that it is always visible and that these two become visible only on rollover, just to show you how to do it in case you ever wanted to have more than one element visible at any given time. So let's try this by first going to our code view, and we'll navigate to the aside area. After the first aside tag, I'd like you to just put in a little bit of space here, and we could even tab it in if you wish, although I think I'll keep it right there, and just create a section. And this section will have a class, and I'll double click to create a class. And let's create a class here called slider. After closing that opening tag, I'm going to go down, and like I said, we're going to leave one of these divs visible. So the last div I will leave outside, and that's Jane Lunchbox's div. But after the first two divs and the picture, that's where we will close this section. Now, at the moment, if we went to our live view in design view, you don't really see much of anything, although you'll notice that it's kind of screwed up what's going on with my divs here. They don't really look the way they're supposed to. So we're going to have to start styling a couple of elements to make them look exactly the way we want them to. The first thing we're going to style is that slider. So let's come into the CSS styles, and we are going to be creating a very simple slider element. Now you can position this pretty much anywhere you want, but it's more than likely going to go to the bottom at this section. So what I want to do is to just try and navigate around to the aside areas, and in the aside areas is where we're going to be putting in our section slider. So if I click on new CSS rule, now if we were to say compound based on our selection, you can see that I have selected the wrapper. So let's come in here and we'll do something a little bit different by writing it ourselves. So what I want you to do is to write out section. Remember, we are inside of a section div. And any section that has the class called slider applied to it. So by writing it this way with no space, that means any section with a slider class. If there was a space here, it would say any slider class within section, but that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a section with the class of slider. So I'm going to click OK. And there's a couple of things that I want to do. First of all, we're going to say under the category of box, we're going to give it, actually we can go to the category positioning and we'll kill two birds with one stone. Under positioning, I want you to write down relative. Now we're going to have relative positioning for this element. The next thing I want to really be doing is setting the overflow to hidden. Remember, based on the height that we're going to be using, anything that is not within that height will in fact be hidden, and that's exactly what we want to see. Now if I do go to box, I will give it a padding and margin on the bottom of 0. Now we might have to adjust some of our divs in a second, but we'll do that soon enough. So I'm going to click OK. Now the only other thing I want to be doing to this section slider is adding a property. And the property that we're going to add is max-height. And once we have that in place, we are going to give it a maximum height of, well, let's say 200, because that picture is in fact 200. Now look what's happened. It's been set to be 200, and anything that was inside of it is hidden because the overflow is hidden. Now that still doesn't fix the elements that we had outside of that box, but we'll fix that in just a second. Now, the one thing I want to do with that slider is also apply a transition to it. So let's try this. We'll go to the CSS transitions in the window menu, and what I want to be doing is selecting the element that I am going to be working with. So first of all, let's make sure that we have the section slider selected. I also want to make sure that if I turn off live view and I go to my code view, that the slider section is the one that we are in fact selecting. Then I want to come to the plus sign. In the new transition, we are going to be targeting, as we said before, the section slider. That's all the way down here at the bottom. So once we've got that in place, we're going to say on hover. And we are going to give it a little bit of a duration. Let's say something like 0.75 seconds. Not quite a full second, just a little bit different. No delay, so we don't have to put anything in there. It'll just give us a default value of 0. The timing function, let's say ease in out. Same one as we were using before. And the property that I'm going to be targeting here is max height. Well, the max height that we had given before was 200. The max height here is going to be 999 pixels. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to stretch out to 999. It's just saying, listen, the maximum you can stretch out is 999. It'll stretch out to be whatever is inside of it. So we'll create the transition. Now that we've got that transition in place, let's look in our layout just quickly. And you'll see here section slider, and now it's got the WebKit, Moz, MS, and Opera transitions all in place. And the section slider's hover is set to a max height of 999. I'm going to Command S, save that file. And then if we go back to our design view, in our live view, take a look. When I open this up, see what's happening? It's now expanding to reveal the other elements inside of it. That's a really nice trick. However, we still have this problem that all these elements are bleeding into each other. So we're going to have to do something with the div itself. So before I preview it in browser, I'm going to just come here and go to my CSS styles. And what we want to be now targeting is the aside div. You might remember that all of those gray boxes are actually in the aside div itself. So let's edit the rule. And once we're in the edit rule, there's a couple of things I want to be doing with this. These elements are not necessarily floating. So given the fact that the relative slider is encompassing all of these, I want to make sure that these elements are floating left. Now, if we do look at that, you can see that we've eliminated the problem that we had just a second ago. I'm just going to click OK for a sec, and I'm going to expand this way so that I can scroll my way on over to this area. So look at that. Just by positioning things as floating left, you'll notice that that's given us exactly the look that we were going for. It's quite nice. Okay, the only other thing that I want to sort of address with these elements at the moment is the fact that given that we have them here, you'll notice that there's a little bit of spacing issue at the elements that I have here. So when this one is collapsed, the first one doesn't really give me my space that I need. So let's go back to editing the aside div yet again, and let's go to box, and let's maybe make some subtle adjustments to what we're doing here. I'm going to give it a margin on the top of 20 pixels, and on the right hand side I'm still going to say 0. And you'll notice here on the bottom, I'm going to change that to 0 and still keep the one on the left. Everything else should work out okay. Now, if I scroll over here, you can see that that's looking a whole lot better. The only problem is that the picture's giving me sort of like double margin space here, which I don't really want. So I'm also going to make some adjustments to the aside picture. So I'll go to where it says aside pick, and we can just click on the edit. And in here you'll see that there's some margin on the bottom of 10 pixels. I'm going to actually remove that, click OK, And let's refresh just by clicking on the live again. And you'll see that that's looking a whole lot better. And it's giving me the amount of spacing that I want. So at this point, I'm pretty happy with what I've got. And what we can see is you've got a little bit of a transition that works quite nicely and gives you a very common and useful means of working with CSS transitions.